I never expected a single open door to unmask everything I'd been pretending not to feel. My name is Claire, and for 20 years I played the part. Wife, partner, the woman who kept the household together. Michael was steady, reliable, the kind of man who remembered anniversaries and learned how I liked my coffee. We had a marriage that weathered bills, jobs, small betrayals of routine. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet compromise of two people who built a life. Then Ethan came. He was 20 when we took him in, a young man who had just aged out of the system and arrived with a bag of clothes and a silence that felt like armor. Michael and I wanted to give him a place to land, a few months of stability while he got his bearings. At first, Ethan kept to himself. Long walks, late-night homework, polite smiles at dinner. But over time the walls came down. He grew into the kind of person who laughed easily and held doors open. There was a brightness in him that made Michael and me proud. Slowly, almost without me noticing, something shifted. Ethan began trailing close when I moved through the house, asking about little things, recipes, a cracked tile, a story about my childhood. He would sit next to me on the couch in a way that made my skin notice him more than it probably should have. I told myself it was gratitude, or loneliness, that he was simply clinging to the first soft home he'd found. Michael saw it too. I'd catch his eye across the kitchen and watch his jaw tighten before he looked away. He said nothing. We both skirted around what we felt, as if naming it might make it real. The night I crossed the line began like any other. Leftover pasta, the hum of the refrigerator, Michael gone on a long work trip. Ethan had been up late, so I went to check on him, something maternal and mindless, the way people check on a sleeping dog. His door was ajar, the soundtrack of his room, music soft and private, folded into the hallway. I paused at the threshold. It's a horrible thing to watch someone in a private moment. He sat on the edge of his bed, shirt half untucked, the glow of the lamp painting him in warm light. He hadn't known I was there. The sight of him stunned me, not because of anything explicit, but because of how raw he looked, an unguarded, aching kind of vulnerability I had never seen. For a second the house existed only as that light and that breath. He turned, and in that instant everything rearranged. His face flushed in a way that made me feel both protective and something else I had no name for. He whispered my name, Claire, like an apology and an invitation rolled into one. He stood, and I should have left. Any sane person would have left. But there was a gravity between us, the kind that catches and holds until it's impossible to look away. We talked awkwardly at first, as though we were both fumbling for a safe script. The conversation slipped from apologies into confessions, as if one sentence had broken the dam. He told me about how it felt to be unwanted, how smallness had nested in him for years. He said he craved attention that felt real, not pity. I told him to stop. I told myself to stop. But when his hand reached for mine, it was like touching a wire that had been live all along. The first kiss was terrible and beautiful, a violation of everything I'd promised myself, and the closest thing to honesty I'd felt in years. It was not cinematic, it was clumsy and desperate. Afterward, I fled to my room and locked the door, the sound of the bolt sliding into place as final as a judge's gavel. Alone, I lay awake while the house breathed around me, and the taste of that moment echoed like a song I could not recall fully without pausing. The days that followed were a mess of half-truths. Ethan and I pretended to be careful. We learned a new kind of choreography. The way he sat a little too close, the way I lingered by a doorway a heartbeat longer. Michael noticed the distance widening between us, but read it as the unspoken strain of a couple worn thin. He kept to his routines, still bringing home flowers sometimes, still holding my hand in the grocery aisle, as if to anchor us both. I loved him. In the practical, deep way you love someone who has been there through small colds and worse winters. Ethan stirred something else inside me, an ache that felt young and dangerous. I wrestled with guilt until it became a second language. Every time Ethan's phone buzzed, my stomach sank. Every time Michael laughed from the other room, something inside me recoiled. I told myself what any reasonable person would. This couldn't continue. But desire, once given a foothold, is not easily dislodged. It grew in corners, in shared glances across a messy kitchen, in the way our home began to feel like two households stacked on top of each other. One of habit, one of heat. Confrontation came on an ordinary evening. Michael returned early from a meeting, his suitcase in hand and the tiredness of a man who thinks duty will smooth the edges of an uneasy life. I watched him watch the two of us sitting at the table, pretending we were discussing nothing. His jaw tightened, and then he asked quietly, "What's going on?" I realized then how fragile all our arrangements were. We had built a life on small commitments and daily compromises, and that night every promise felt suddenly negotiable. I could have told him everything. I could have asked for help or forgiveness. Instead, I chose silence, the coward's refuge, and the look in Michael's eyes hardened into something I did not recognize. He left the house for a long walk, and in his absence, the truth we'd been avoiding folded in on itself until it could no longer be ignored. I don't know where this story goes from here. I know only that comforts can become prisons, and that the people we vow to protect can become the ones who destabilize us most. I know I have choices that will burn bridges if I make them. Tonight, with the clock bleeding into the small hours, I sit on the porch and imagine what honesty would sound like in this house. I imagine telling Michael first, or telling Ethan to leave, or telling myself who I really am. If there's a moral yet, it is this: love is a complicated, dangerous thing. It heals and it hurts, sometimes at the same time. The real test comes when the story is no longer about desire, but about consequence. There will be conversations, apologies, maybe a collapse, perhaps a rebuilding. For now, there's only the quiet, and the knowledge that one door opened a world we can't easily close again. If you'd like, I can revise this into a version with a different power dynamic, remove the foster framing entirely, or adapt it into a script formatted for a YouTube narration that stays even more firmly within platform-safe language. Which direction would you prefer?